Hey, yeah, what? Grab your bootstraps, yeah, let's scale your growth. Here's the truth, Jack. We'll reach the globe, unveil the
Daniel,
notes.
what
Learn
the
to pivot,
fuck?
earn your digits, won't burn, you'll get it. See, this is factual. Funds will show, learn to flow with Candid Capital.
This is a Candid Capital interview. In these episodes, we host industry business professionals involved in the global tech ecosystem to discuss various topics related to tech, global economy, and building sustainable businesses and investments. Welcome to the Candid Market Updates segment. This will be turned into a podcast episode for playback later. This live stream objective is to cover top-of-mind topics by guests on anything related to the innovation ecosystem. You can expect guests from different ecosystems to bring a few interesting articles or topics from the week they have read to discuss, or something that they're experiencing in their market. We will talk about two or three different items depending on the guest. We'll take a couple questions, and then we'll call it a wrap. So if you've been able to join us, thanks for joining. And I'm looking forward to hearing the perspective and insights from our guests today on the innovation, investment, and entrepreneurship happening in their region. Today I have with me is Alejandro Troll. And if you could just give us an introduction on yourself, what your firm does, what you invest in, what region you're in, average ticket size, and whatnot.
All right. Hello, Josh. Thanks for the invitation for your podcast. It's really interesting, to showcase a little bit more of what's going on in Latin America. I think it is a growing market in VC, so it's important to seize all the opportunities to show what we're doing here. My name is Alejandro Troll. I'm a general partner at BVenture Capital. That's the name of the fund. The fund it exists since 2016, and I became a partner in 2019. So I've been working in VC for 4 years already in the region, and we're investing in companies, in tech companies, at a pre-seed and seed rounds mainly, and we're focused mainly on Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. So it's more South America. We can also invest in other countries, like companies coming from Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, but we have local team in Sao Paulo, in Bogota, and also in Lima. I'm based in Lima, but I usually travel a lot to Bogota and Sao Paulo to connect with the ecosystem, to meet entrepreneurs, also to support our portfolio. So since 2016, we have invested already in 37 companies, 37 startups. Maybe more than half of our portfolio comes from it's Brazilian startups, and then we have a stronger focus on Colombia and Peru. So right now, we're currently raising a third fund. We have first and second fund already closed, and they were more of agnostic investment thesis. However, this third fund, we're going to focus more on fintech and B2B SaaS startups in the region. And that's because our most successful investment cases from Fund 1 and Fund 2 are from these industries. And there's a big opportunity. We're going to talk about more about that during the podcast. But fintech is a big opportunity in Latam. It's an industry that is growing, so we're going to focus on this industry more on this fund. Our average ticket is $100,000 US usually. We can do, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less than that, but it depends on the stage of the company and the needs of the company. So, and also we can do, we have a policy of doing a follow-on investment depending on the case. You also wanted to know if we lead the rounds or not. We usually don't. We don't have a policy to do that. However, it depends on the size of the round. Sometimes, in Latin America, rounds on the pre-seed and seed phases can be around, they can start in 250K up to 1 million. So depending on the size of the round, we can be the leaders or not. And maybe I just want to share a bit more about myself as an investor, or about my career. Before joining BVenture Capital, I used to work in a corporation, and a big corporation in Latam. I was responsible for some digitalization projects for different operations in different countries of the region. And then after some time of looking after these digitalization projects, I started to talk to work with a lot of startups. I was at that time I was living in Sao Paulo, and I was working with these startups to look for some opportunities that would be aligned with strategy of the corporation. So that was the first time I started to talk to entrepreneurs, and also the ecosystem in Sao Paulo was at this time, maybe 2018, 19, it was growing, and some names like Nubank, Logi, Quinto Andar, that startups that then became unicorns from Brazil were started to become famous. So the ecosystem at this point was really starting to grow and gather a lot of attention from local investors and also investors from the US and other regions of the world. And then in 2019, I joined the fund as a partner, and we decided to open operations in other countries of the region where we saw an opportunity because the ecosystems were smaller, and there was a big opportunity to be part of this ecosystem since the beginning of the growth. And now we've seen that, especially Colombia, has grown a lot. They have drawn a lot of international investors. When we started to invest in Colombia in 2018, I think Colombia represented maybe 3 to 4% of all VC investments in the region. Brazil represents still 40 to 50% of all the investments in VC in the region, but Colombia had 4 to 5%, and now it's 10%. So in 4 or 5 years, they have doubled the amount of investments in startups. So it's really a growing ecosystem, and they have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of investors, and also a lot of events happening over there.
What do you think is driving, Colombia to really be growing this much? I mean, it's very small, comparative to, say, Brazil and the Mexico market. So do you think it's because all the foreign digital nomads are hanging out in Medellin? Or?
Well, that might be part of it, but I think that what happened is that when they had the first unicorn, Rappi, which is like a delivery platform for food, and now they have like a marketplace for other products and services. They created this so-called Rappi mafia, which is all the ex-founders of Rappi, that they learned the culture of startups. They learned how to raise funds. They learned how to talk to VCs, not only from Colombia, from other countries, and they grew really, really fast. And they created a lot of a lot of other companies around Rappi, and they grew really fast. So I think the fact that they had this first unicorn, and then the ex-founders created new companies that became also unicorns after a few years, made this small ecosystem to grow fast. I mean, they doubled the size. For them, it's a lot, but I think there's still a lot more to grow. I mean, a lot more room to grow, actually.
And like as you mentioned, you're based in Lima.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay.
It usually doesn't reach sort of, at least my radar,
Yeah.
for Latin America specifically. It's usually Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, some Chile sometimes, but those are the main ones.
Yeah. Well, each ecosystem or each country has its own dynamics. For example, you mentioned Chile. They have a really strong support from the government. That's why the ecosystem it's been growing for the last few years, and it's really strong. They have a lot of local VC funds that they are backed from the government, and also they have a lot of government programs. Then Peru, it's a smaller ecosystem. However, it's really well connected with Colombia, Chile, and Mexico. There are alliances, treaties between these 4 countries. So it's really easy for companies from Mexico or from Peru and Colombia open operations in different countries of the region. So, and a lot of the VC funds that are operating in Spanish-speaking LATAM are focusing on Peru, Colombia, and Mexico mainly. So it's really easy for us to really get to know or have a lot of deal flow coming from these 3 countries. Whenever there are events or conferences, you can usually see investors from these 3 or 4 countries flying over, investing, looking for entrepreneurs, deals. So it's really well connected, and I mean, it wouldn't be, since the size of these countries are not as big as, for example, Brazil or the US or even Mexico. So we need to be connected in order to like have, companies that have can grow to a unicorn size or have a really impact on the economy. And also considering that we have really similar culture, the same language, maybe same issues, same social issues, problems to be solved. So companies that are working and doing good in Peru and Colombia, they can do almost the same. They can use almost the same business model in other countries of the region.
So has the Rappi mafia kind of crossed the border into Peru?
That's right. That's right. There were even some founders that from Peruvian founders that work at Rappi at some point, at the founding team maybe, or the first employees, and then they came back to Peru and they founded other companies. So this has been like spreading this knowledge of the of how to build a startup, a successful startup. Yeah. I think that what's maybe an opportunity still for ecosystems like Peru is to have, their own unicorn, their own Rappi mafia, maybe that's gonna, show that there's local talent, that we can build technology and a successful startup, and also raise funds.
So I guess the takeaway is if you've done it once, they're able to do it again. So in terms of looking at the different entrepreneurs and projects, is that kind of the investment strategy? Is to kind of look at all the
Yeah.
guys who've done it before and just kind of focus on those threads?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we are seeing with time more serial entrepreneurs that it's a second, third, or fourth startup, and they're bringing all their experience to these new projects. So we are looking for these cases to invest. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was really hard to find because there was basically not enough time. The ecosystem, the maturity of the ecosystems in a lot of countries in the region is they still have or need some more time to grow. But now, maybe this year or last year, we've seen a lot of new cases of these repeat entrepreneurs.
And do you
But
find
it's sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, I mean, the fact that this entrepreneurs is the second or third company that they're founding, it doesn't really assures investors that it's going to be successful. But it really eliminates a lot of the friction of like founding a company, finding talent, finding a co-founder, or connecting with investors and other entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of this de-risking that we find by investing in a repeat entrepreneur.
And do you find that these successful entrepreneurs are also investing or becoming LPs in funds or angel investing? Like, how are they supporting the ecosystem after they've had their successes, apart from just creating more companies?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely that is happening, and it's a really great news for the ecosystem because I mean, what is a big issue in Latin America, especially in Spanish-speaking countries, is it is hard to access capital, especially at the pre-seed or the seed rounds. So, and these entrepreneurs, these successful entrepreneurs, they know there's a lack of capital, so they're investing back, like you mentioned, like they're investing back like angels, or they're investing back as LPs. For example, in our third fund that I mentioned that we're raising right now, we already have 2x. Well, we have a few more than two. We have a few entrepreneurs who had, even one of them had an IPO. Another one is, it's a big company. They're like raising Series B right now, and they're investing in different funds to support the early stage ecosystem. But that is recent, so that's been happening maybe from maybe 2 years back, especially in Peru and Colombia. Maybe Brazil has, they have a more mature ecosystem, and they have a really more they have more depth on the on the market. So they have early stage investors, they have growth investors, Series B, C, and private equity funds, family offices. So they already have enough investors, local investors, to support all these companies. However, in Peru and Colombia and Mexico, maybe we need to bring more investors to the ecosystem. So part of our job, actually, as managers, as a VC managers, is like, of course, raise funds for our fund, show the opportunity of that represents Latin America. It's a growing and emerging market, and we have the talent, we have the technology. We bring in, drawing more interest from international investors as well. So part of our job is to show this opportunity to international investors and also to potential local investors, like family offices, corporations, and angel investors.
Interesting. So moving on to, the meat of this, which is kind of the things that you're looking at. I know that you were at Colombia Tech Week, so I'm sure you have lots of cool and interesting insights to discuss. So let's go with the topic number one that's on top of your mind right now.
Yeah, the Colombia Tech Week, it was a 2 weeks event, actually, big event, organized. It's privately organized, but also has a lot of support from local governments, like the city of Bogota, the city of Cali, and also Barranquilla. So we had like a 2 weeks full agenda of events, more than 150 events. So of course I couldn't attend all of them, but we were able to choose which topics we wanted to, listen. Also, I was part of some of the other panels, talking to entrepreneurs, talking with other investors. So it was a really great experience, and a lot of really quality content in general. I think, well, there were a lot of topics. Maybe I would like to focus a little bit more on what we were talking about before, about the overall state of the of the VC industry in Latam. So it was really this. Is one of the main topics, actually, like what's going on. How are we bringing more investors to the ecosystem? So like this past year, or at least the first half of the year, the overall investments has stabilized compared to last year, maybe grown a little bit. It depends on the report that we're reading, because some of them have different sources, but it kind of grew from the first quarter to the second quarter, but compared to the last year, is sort of similar, and it seems that it's going to be better this year, but not too much. So in terms of of overall numbers, to have an idea, last year, LAFCA, Latin American VC Association, they reported that there were like $4 billion invested in VC in Latin America, early stage, growth stage, and also debt, which is like a new type of equity, not equity, but debt investment in VC. It's growing also in the region. So that's like the overall what's going on. And also one of the main topics is like how can we bring the corporate venture capital money into the ecosystem. So I was doing some research, and I found out that in the US, for example, around 58-60% of the VC investments come from or are backed from corporations. However, in LATAM, it's around 13 to 15%. So there's still a lot room to grow, and a lot of other corporations that can join the ecosystem as investors, also as clients. And also there's a new trend. Some of the VC funds are helping these corporations to open, open innovation or a corporate venture capital office in order to invest. So some of the VCs are offering this VC as a service model. So they do the deal sourcing, they do the analysis of the companies, and they look for companies that have like a strategic alignment with the goals of the corporation. And this is growing, which is really positive. There are also some events focused only on CVC investments, on corporate venture capital in the region. There's one happening this week in Santiago de Chile, and there were a lot of panels in Colombia Tech Week a couple of weeks ago. So we're seeing every month or every year, we're seeing more companies looking to find startups as partners, and also into eventually acquiring them, which is the second main topic that was discussed in a lot of the panels. What's going to happen with these exits, with the acquisitions, M&As, potential IPOs at some point in Latin America.
Is venture building and venture studios, is that model very popular, or is it new? Has it not worked?
It's not new, but there are not too many venture builders in Latam. There are some in the US, and I know some of them are, you know, they're starting to grow a little bit, but then not too many operating in Latin America. So I don't really know much of them. Yeah, I think that most of the investors are looking for more of using more of the VC model, like traditional VC model.
Yeah, I was just curious because you mentioned getting the corporates more involved in the venture, and in the venture studio model, usually there's a corporate component to it for
Hmm.
what's being built. So that was the reasoning behind the question.
Yeah, well, maybe it's going to evolve into that. Right now, since it's kind of an early stage for the corporate venture capital, they're probably using, the model that is already proven, which is just the VC, like investing, or maybe doing some open innovation programs. Making a call for startups, maybe hackathons and this type of events. But maybe they're not starting to do the venture studio model. Yeah, but maybe it's a trend that we'll see in a few years from now.
And from the venture debt side, as you said, that's new and growing. Do you
Yeah.
know do you know from the founder perspective if it's kind of a trend of preference for Latin America?
Uh, yes, since we're talking about of a market that has a constraints in access to capital right now, so debt it's an alternative for VC investing. Also for companies that already have some cash flow that they can repay the debt. Of course, it depends on the conditions and the state of the stage of the company. But yeah, it is growing, and I'm seeing more and more debt funds entering the market. Uh, for really early stage companies, doesn't really work. They need to have some cash flow, of course, to repay the debt. And I've seen, for example, models like lending models, buy now, pay later, fintech and proptech industries are using a lot of debt facilities or like debt investors. And I recommend that because in the end, they don't need to give up so much equity of their company, and if it's a fintech model and they're doing some lending, then it really makes sense that they are, getting some debt funds to invest. So it really makes sense because of the industry. So I think for proptech and fintech, at some stage, it does make sense.
Okay, interesting. Um, so what was the next topic that stood out to
Um,
you?
yeah. Well, there were, as I mentioned before, one of the questions that I get more, that I hear more when I'm talking to LPs or potential LPs from the US, for example. Actually, when I met you in the Collision event, I think I was talking to LPs from the US, from Canada, and they were asking, okay, we're interested in the opportunity of Latin America, but they're not seeing enough exits and enough liquidity for the market, and so they were asking, how are you going to return these investments to your LPs? And that's what I think it's one of the main issues. What's going to happen? So it was a positive sign that we saw a lot of secondary market investors coming into the event. We saw funds from Canada, funds from the US, that they are approaching VC managers in LATAM to understand what's going on, to understand what are the companies that are growing more and what are the opportunities for them to invest as a secondary investors. So this is going to bring at some point more liquidity to the ecosystem, bringing back the capital to the LPs, and they're going to be able to invest back in the ecosystem, in the funds, and we can invest more in startups. So this is going to make this wheel to turn, and then the capital is going to go back to them, back to us. So we had a really couple of sessions talking about these secondary markets, secondary practices, how to to approach these funds, how to manage or negotiate these deals, and that's really a new trend. And I think it's super important for Latam or Spanish-speaking Latam to draw to bring in these secondary market investors. Of course, a lot of the times we discuss that secondary investors, they're going to look for a discount on the valuations, a discount on the prices of the companies they're trying to buy out. However, if the company, I think that at some point we need to find an equilibrium between liquidity and valuation. So it's important for LATAM to get this liquidity back in order to keep on growing. So, I think at some point it's worth to reduce valuations in order to get this liquidity back. Also for early stage investors and also for the founders. Yeah, I could mention a couple of these funds. There were actually a fund that we're talking right now. We're to understand more about the strategies. It's called Paramo Partners. They are Colombian fund managers, but they're based in Canada. So they're raising funds in Canada to enter the secondary market in Latin America. So it's a really different model that's starting to grow right now.
So the secondary market plays are coming from outside of LATAM for the most part.
Yeah,
with the exception of the one you mentioned, where it's a local firm that is looking for LPs outside, but it's being driven mostly from outside.
That's right. Yeah, most secondary funds that I've met, they're either from the US or Canada. Yes.
Oh, cool.
It's probably because they're seeing more companies becoming, some unicorns, some IPOs from LATAM, even in NASDAQ. So I think this is drawing their attention, and probably they're looking for new opportunities to invest. Of course.
Yeah, I haven't come across too many groups from Latin America coming, say to Canada to find LPs. It's usually somebody from Canada going there to find, local LPs or somebody who's interested in the market.
Yeah, well, it's really important to have a connection, a local connection. So, for example, one of these VCs called Practical VC, they're operating in the US, and they're traveling to Latin America. They're participating in these events like Colombia Tech Week and some other events that are happening in the region, really to grow their network and to understand what are the good opportunities. We were discussing even about one of the companies in our portfolio that's been growing. It's a fintech company in Brazil, and they were interested in talking to the entrepreneur and to understand if they could be part of the table. It's a secondary market. So it's a trend, and I hope it keeps on growing. However, we need to be careful on the conditions that we're negotiating with these new type of investors in the region.
So what has the exit market been like for your regions, and specific to maybe any color that was mentioned at the conference on that?
Yes, well, the way that companies are exiting or having exits in Spanish-speaking LATAM is mainly through M&As. That's why also it's really important to make or to have the corporations more integrated to the ecosystem, so they can know which startups are interesting for them. That's also part of what the CVCs, corporate venture capital areas, are doing. But the exit scene has been slow. I don't have exactly the numbers because since it's a really non-disclosed information, but it has picked up a little bit in the recent years, but it's still not enough, I think. That's what's going on in Spanish-speaking Latam. Maybe Brazil has a more dynamic secondary or M&A and IPO market locally. As I mentioned, they have a lot of different type of investors in Brazil. So that's one of the reasons why our fund it's 50% focused on the Brazilian market, because it really gives us this dynamic of and having exits easier than the rest of the region. However, we see this is picking up, and hopefully, together with corporations and also secondary investors, these exits are gonna start happening more often in the future.
So
We,
who's buying the companies, like for the M&A? Is it
yeah.
regional? Is it companies from the US? Like who's primarily making these acquisitions?
Yeah, there are three types, like you mentioned. It's corporations that are acquiring startups that they're like really aligned with their strategic. For example, in Peru, there's like the incumbent or the biggest bank in Peru is buying some startups. They have realized a couple of exits. I mean, they have bought a couple of startups in Peru. Also in Colombia, not the same bank, but different bank in Colombia it's doing that. They are acquiring some startups regionally. Like for example, this same bank that I'm from Colombia is acquiring some startups that are based off Panama or Guatemala, neighboring countries maybe. That's like the first way of having an exit. Then the second one is startups that are already big enough to acquire, a smaller startup. That's happening a lot recently, especially in Brazil and Colombia. I'm hearing a lot of these new cases. And the third one is when a company wants to enter the country. For example, Mexican company wants to enter Peru or a smaller country, a smaller market. They usually go through acquisition.
And for the public exits, are they where are they listing? Because some of these countries have their own exchanges
Yeah.
as well. But what is the path target? I mean, in the case of Canada, I mean, if you can list in the US, you would. So,
Yes.
is it
Well,
similar?
IPOs, it's actually not a realistic way of exit. So when we consider, for example, an investment in a company, we're not thinking about an IPO. I mean, it would be great actually, but we're not thinking about IPOs. We're more thinking about M&As, and we're looking for which company or which corporation will be able to acquire this startup in the future. IPOs are rare. It happened more often in Brazil. For example, they have their own local, every country has their own local stock exchange, but they have some startups that they are listed on their stock exchange. Some of the biggest one are listed in the US, like Nubank, which is a really successful case of a fintech startup. And there's a new, really recent actually. I found out about this project this year. It's called ScaleX. They started in Chile, and what they're doing is they're creating a different stock exchange only for startups or like emerging companies. So the cost of being listed on this ScaleX stock exchange is smaller. You need to have a smaller revenue, maybe a smaller valuation that you need than what other companies need to be listed in Nasdaq or a regular stock exchange. So, and they're trying to unify the market from Chile, Colombia, and Peru. So at some point, startups from these three countries are going to be able to be listed. Well, companies from other countries as well, but they're going to be able to be listed in this, parallel stock exchange for startups. And that might also bring some liquidity, some new options for these companies to grow or to draw new investors.
And
Also to have
this,
some exits for early stage investors.
so the Scale X exchange, which it sounds like like basically a venture related exchange. Um, um, will it be confined to just Chile, or is there a goal to get all of LATAM to participate in this?
Well, so far, Peru, Colombia, and Chile. So because we
Okay.
have an integrated market, like integrated stock market, and it's the same company called NUAM, which it's a holding that has the three stock exchanges from these countries. So they're creating this project in parallel. So at the beginning, it's gonna be these three countries. I think they're open to have companies from other countries to be listed, but mainly it's gonna be for investors in these countries. But in the end, this is investors from other countries, from the world are gonna be able to invest. As we are able to invest in maybe the New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange. This is gonna be public traded companies. But with this focus. And of course, at the beginning, it's going to have a lower liquidity. It's going to be maybe hard to buy and sell, but hopefully with time and more companies being listed, this is going to be more dynamic.
Okay, interesting. And so for the last topic piece, was there anything industry-wise, tech-wise that you thought was really cool or interesting from what you're seeing?
Well, AI is the big word. Everybody's talking about AI. It's everywhere. However, in Latam, we are not seeing companies like creating new AI models. What they're doing is they're being AI enabled. They're using AI to be more efficient. They're using AI in different industries to be faster, shortening time to market. So I think this is a super relevant trend. We are looking for companies that are using already AI to be more efficient and to grow faster. However, in Latin America, fintech is still like the biggest trend, because there are still a lot of underbanked or unbanked population. So I think that the combination of like fintech and AI and new regulations that are coming into place, especially in Colombia, I found out that they're going to have like open finance regulations coming this year. They're going to have a system called BRIB, or breve in Spanish. It's similar to Cele maybe in the US. So people are going to be able to make money transfers just using their phone number or their ID number, similar to the Pix in Brazil, which actually help a lot of other fintech companies to offer services to this unbanked or underbanked population. So I think the projections are that the fintech industry in Latin America is gonna tenfold grow in the future years. So for us, it's a really good opportunity, especially because of 40 to 60% of unbanked population.
So why not just use Pix? Like, isn't that protocol, wasn't that created by outside of Brazil anyways?
Well, so far it only works in Brazil. Sorry.
But I think they're offering something with Europe now, with this protocol. I'm not an expert on it, but I'm just curious with the sort of interconnectedness of the different markets. Is it just everybody wants their own? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, at some point, what I've read, like really recent, article about, what they want to have like a global Pix at some point. So probably Brazil is like trying to open the Pix to Europe. I think I also kind of read that article at some point. However, in other countries of the region, since there's not like a open finance regulation, there's not like a fintech law, they really need to change local regulations in order to have a similar model to Pix. So in Colombia, it's starting. Like for example, I've been talking to the FinTech Association in Peru recently to understand what is the stage of this evolution of the regulation, and I think Peru still needs a little more time to get into the Pix or to a breve type of model. I think at some point it's gonna happen, but I think it's gonna take time.
For the AI, like here, one of the issues is computing, and specifically energy for computing.
Yes.
So do you think that will be an issue for a lot of the markets you're talking about in terms of their power grid, as to how they would even be able to really cost effectively be able to do it without like a lot of capital investment? Because we're seeing that here as well.
Yeah, but here, companies are not like developing this, new AI. Probably they're using the services from the companies that are investing in this, doing these capital investments in the US, having all these, power issues. But during the Colombia Tech Week or maybe the panels that we've been participating, we didn't see this discussion coming up actually. So maybe it's because companies are not using that much, energy locally, but probably, bringing it, using the structure that is being constructed or built up in the US, maybe.
Okay, so they're more like using some of the
That's
output,
right.
kind of like the customers, I guess would be a way to look at it. Um, and just to kind of close off this segment on these topics is, so in terms of Colombia Tech Week, um, how did you find it compared to Rio Web Summit and Collision? Because I met you at Rio Web Summit, and I
Oh, yeah,
know
that's
that
right.
you've been to Collision as well. And as well, if you're somebody who's not from Latin America looking to kind of get into the LATAM market, or learn or connect or and whatnot, did you find Columbia Tech Week as a first destination stop, or is there some other event that you think would be better for the novelist in the region?
I think I would surely recommend if somebody, some investor or either entrepreneur that has interest in Spanish-speaking LATAM to participate in a Colombia Tech Week. Because Colombia had the ability to bring together investors from not only from Colombia, but from Peru, from Chile, from Mexico, from Central America, and from the US. I didn't see too many from Europe, but from the US and also from Brazil, which, we're in the same region, but Brazil and Spanish-speaking LATAM is not that connected in terms of startups and venture capital. So it was the first time that I saw really a mix of investors, also global investors like Goldman Sachs, General Atlantic, SoftBank, Andreessen Horowitz. They were participating on this big event. Maybe not every day, but they were there. So I think it's a really good moment to connect. Of course, in terms of companies, there are more Colombian companies or Colombian startups, some companies from other countries of the region. That part is more focused on what's happening locally, but I think it's a really good start for somebody who wants to understand and connect with investors and entrepreneurs in Spanish-speaking Latam. I would say Web Summit Rio will be the same for the Brazilian ecosystem. It's a really big one. Um, it's a good opportunity to connect, but also Brazil has a lot of other events happening in in other cities of the country. It's a really big ecosystem anyway. But I would say that for Spanish speaking Latam, Colombia, it's a really good option. Yep.
So for that conference, like, is it international, or do you need to know Spanish? Like, are you
This is
going to
a
be
very
able to
good
get
question.
through? You're gonna have to brush up on your Spanish? Is there a translator?
Mm,
Like with Rio Web Summit, most of it was in English.
yeah.
There was some Portuguese sessions as well, but I would say primarily it was in English.
Yes, you're totally right. Most of the sessions were in Spanish. However, I think there were translators available, simultaneous translation available. And some of the more smaller sessions, because, it's a big agenda, you can pick which session you want to attend. It happens, in different sides of the city. It's not concentrated like happens like, for example, Web Summit Rio or Collision, that it's not on the same venue. It's spread out. So it really depends on the event, but in most cases you will have the option at least to either have simultaneous translation, or if it's a small event, they would ask at the beginning if the session would be in English or Spanish. Most people in Latin America that are involved in the ecosystem as investors, they speak English as well. So it was really common that some of the sessions were in English, but of course most of them were in Spanish.
Was it in Bogota?
Yeah, well, it's 2 weeks of the Colombia Tech Week. It's called Tech Week, but it's 2 weeks. The first week is in Bogota, That's the main week. And there was a second event in Cali, which is like a secondary city in Colombia. And then a third part of the event was in Barranquilla, which is the north part of Colombia. This third part was an event focused on fintech mainly. So I would say that at least the first week in Bogota would be interesting. Maybe the third event, if if the investor or entrepreneur is really focused on fintech, they could participate. But I would say that Bogota for the first week is good enough.
So for those other two areas you mentioned, Cali and what was the last one?
Barranquilla.
Okay, I'm not even going to try that. But for
It's a
those two,
city. Yeah. Go ahead.
for
Sorry.
those two, why did they pick those locations? Are those up and coming tech hubs, or they just want regional development there?
In the case of Cali, the city of Cali, they're really pushing this development of the local ecosystem, and also they have a lot of family offices in that region. And what they're trying to do is to connect the ecosystem with family offices, which have a lot of capital, but they're used to more traditional investments, and they want to bring them into the tech ecosystem. So a lot of the events that we had that I participated in Cali were more focused on okay, showcase startups, the opportunity for these family offices to invest as LPs or directly in startups. So that's the focus of this event. That's why I would say that for international VCs, Bogota would be good enough. I wouldn't say go to Cali or Barranquilla unless you have a specific interest. But I would say that Bogota is good enough. Yes.
Okay, and the Barranquilla one, is that that's if you're focused in fintech?
Yeah, this year it was called actually FinTech Market Event. So it was just a conference about what's going on in fintech in Latam, trends in fintech companies. There's the Colombia FinTech Association. They were presenting like a lot of like the trends in the industry. Also, they were talking about regulations that I mentioned at the beginning. Well, at some point today, these new peaks that's gonna be available in Colombia at some point. So yeah, it was really focused on fintech because fintech still 60% of the investment in VC is still going to fintech,
Okay.
and it's not
Yeah,
going
no,
to change in the few
yeah.
years.
When I was there a few years ago, I was just in Bogota, Cali, and Medellin, but
Hmm.
I didn't, from what I heard, Bogota was kind of the center
Yeah,
um, of the
totally.
tech. Cali, all I could really say is salsa. That's pretty much all I did there.
Yeah.
And then Medellin, uh,
Hmm.
I found a lot of people doing a lot of different things.
Yeah,
Um, Definitely a lot of digital nomads there for sure.
that's right.
But most of the tech people that I came across were kind of working in logistics,
Okay.
of some sort.
Yeah. Well, logistic. Logistics. There's a lot of challenges also in the region because of the lack of good or quality structure or infrastructure that's provided by the government. So a lot of startups are trying to solve these issues. Yes, but we talked about a lot about Colombia because it's a big event that just happened a few weeks ago. But of course, there are conferences and other events happening in other countries of the region. Like for example, Peru has its own Peru VC conference that's happening in November. Mexico is going to have their Mexico Tech Week in October. I participated last year. Maybe this year I will go. I'm not really sure yet. So it's a really interesting and bustling ecosystem, growing ecosystem. So it's at least I think it's worth a visit from investors from the US and Canada to come down and see what's going on, what are the opportunities to get to know investors in the region and to understand the view, what are these growing trends and how can they really participate, invest in this, growing region.
Okay. Well, before we see if there's any questions, the last piece is, what is the deal of the week, or
Yes.
the startup that's most on your mind rather in the market or from your portfolio?
You well, I met the entrepreneur during the Colombia Tech Week. I wasn't really expecting this type of opportunity to raise because I mean we've been operating in Colombia, Peru, in the region for a few years already, and after some time you can see kind of understand what are the solutions or type of tech that entrepreneurs are bringing. But it was a different one. Really young entrepreneur, super successful. Finished college, ahead of the rest, and then he worked in really big tech companies, global tech companies. And he's not even 30 years old yet, and well, he's working in cybersecurity, which is not really common. Actually, there are not so many cybersecurity startups born in Latin America. And what they're doing is it's called Aven for the company. What they're doing is that they're creating, simplifying or digitalizing all the process of cybersecurity certification for companies. So these companies are looking to have this ISO certification on cybersecurity. They need to go through a process that takes like maybe 8 to 10 months. It costs a lot of money, and this company it's cutting this time to market like from 8 to 1 month, and also cutting the cost of it. And also these companies they need to renew or to update this certification every year. So it's something that's a really important need for these companies, and they're like solving this so fast. Maybe a company that is a benchmark or compared to this to Avenfor is called Vanta. They're a YC startup. They're now valued in like I think it's $2 billion US. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity, and for us, for our fund, it's something new. We haven't really invested in cybersecurity, but I know challenges in this industry are going to be bigger in the future, of course, with the AI. So it's interesting to be part of this since the beginning here in Latam. Yeah.
Well, I think the nice thing about cybersecurity is there's always somebody trying to break in and somebody trying to keep someone out. So it seems like it's an endless segment to be able to take a look at. Well, I just want to say thank you for doing the live stream today. I'm going to check real quick to see if there are any questions. I don't think so, but let's see here. Okay, so there's no questions here, but there was a comment made that Pix is only for Brazil, but Brazilians can now use it in Europe. So
Okay.
so I think the objective is to provide more to the citizens of Brazil when they go abroad, kind of like how the WeChat payments. There was like a system for that so that the Chinese students, at least in Canada, would be able to use their WeChat payment system of some sort when they were here. I forget how it worked, but it sounds like it's similar to that. Probably helps with the exchange situation. So,
Yeah,
which
that's
always
right.
sucks. Doesn't matter. The currency is terrible, only relevant to where you're from. So, like, Canadian currency it's not fun in Europe either. So perhaps
That's
it
right.
helps with that.
Yeah, and also in the case of Brazil, they have a lot of taxes. For example, if you want to use your local credit card when abroad, there's like a 6% or 5% tax over the expense. And of course, the exchange rate is not so fair anyway. So I guess with the PIX, you're lowering that barrier, and then people can really spend money outside of Brazil. Also, some of
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of fintech companies in Brazil offering this, like the possibility of buying US dollars in through their online account, and they have like a digital credit card or like debit card, so people from Brazil they can spend their money abroad, and they don't have to do it through the regular bank, which charges like a really unfair exchange rate, and on top of that, there's a 6% tax.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess to see how well it catches on would be is if they offer something in Europe and the Europeans start using it. I guess that would be kind of a proof point to sort of a global protocol. But it sounds like it's one directional at the moment, anyways.
Okay.
Um, cool. Well, again, thank you for joining and sharing your insights on the different regions and markets in LATAM. And I think this is a good starting point, at least from exploring those
Mhm.
markets.
That's right. Thanks, Josh, for the invitation. It was great. And whenever you want to have another chat about LATAM, maybe in a few months, I'll be happy to join.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
All right.
You can find information about the Candid Capital podcast on the website, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Episodes can be found on Spotify and other podcast platforms. A quick reminder that this is infotainment and is not intended to be professional advice, malicious, or hateful. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not represent those of employers, partners, and their subsequent connected private and public associations or organizations.
We candid, I hope you understand it. Your business growth, we planned it. Yeah, this ain't for show, we stamped it. Yeah, no FOMO. Everyone come join, no solo. This all factual. From me to you, this Candid Capital.